They found 3 bullets in the drywall and shattered glass in every milkshake on the counter. The police report said it was a gang dispute, a turf war gone wrong. But the regulars at Sal's diner knew better. They knew that on a rainy Tuesday in November, Dante Moretti, the most feared man in Chicago, walked into a death trap. 30 armed men against one. He should have been dead before his coffee cooled. He wasn't. And it wasn't because of his gun, or his money, or his reputation. It was because of the girl pouring the coffee. This is the true story of how a waitress brought an empire to its knees with a single move. The rain in Chicago doesn't wash the city clean. It just makes the grime slicker. It was 11:45 p.m. on a Tuesday, the kind of night where the streetlights hummed with a nervous energy and the shadows stretched just a little too far. Inside the Iron Skillet, a diner that smelled perpetually of bacon grease and lemon floor polish, Cassidy Miller was wiping down the counter for the 3rd time. She was 26, with tired eyes the color of burnt espresso and a messy bun that had given up on life 3 hours ago. To the world, she was just Cass. She poured coffee. She remembered that old Mr. Henderson liked his toast almost burnt, and she never asked questions. The bell above the door chimed, a sharp, cheerful sound that felt out of place against the storm raging outside. Cass didn't need to look up to know who it was. The heavy, rhythmic thud of Italian leather boots on the checkered linoleum was as familiar to her as her own heartbeat. "Table 4, Dante?" she called out, wringing the rag into a sanitizer bucket. Dante Moretti didn't answer immediately. He shook off a charcoal wool coat, droplets of rain flying like diamonds, and hung it on the rack. He was a man who took up space without trying. Broad shoulders, a jawline that looked carved from granite, and eyes that were always scanning the exits. He wasn't handsome in the way models in magazines were. He was handsome in the way a wolf is beautiful, predatory and magnetic. "Counter tonight, Cass," Dante said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the formica top. He sat on a stool 3 seats down from the register, his back to the wall, facing the door. Always facing the door. Cassidy grabbed the pot of decaf, but he raised a hand. "The strong stuff. It's going to be a long night." "You say that every night," she replied, pouring the dark liquid into a thick ceramic mug. She slid it toward him, their fingers brushing for a fraction of a second. His skin was cold, hers was warm. The contrast sent a jolt of static electricity through her that had nothing to do with the cheap carpet. "Business is demanding," Dante murmured. He took a sip, his eyes never leaving the rain-streaked window. Dante Moretti was the head of the Moretti crime family. Everyone knew it, though no one said it. In this neighborhood, knowing things out loud got you killed. But in the Iron Skillet, he was just the guy who tipped 100% and liked his eggs over easy. "You look tired, Dante," Cassidy said softly, leaning against the counter. The diner was empty, except for them and Sal, the owner, who was snoring softly in the back office. Dante looked at her then, really looked at her. For a moment, the guarded mask slipped. "Tired is a luxury, Cass. I'm hunted." Before she could ask what he meant, the atmosphere in the room shifted. It wasn't a sound, but a change in air pressure. The street outside, usually dotted with passing taxis, had gone dead silent. Dante stiffened. His hand moved imperceptibly towards the inside of his jacket. "Cass," he said, his voice dropping to a command. "Go to the kitchen. Lock the door. Do not come out until I say so." "What? Why?" "Go." The front door didn't chime this time. It crashed open. It started with 2 men, then 5, then 10. They poured into the small diner like a flood of black leather and bad intentions. They were wet, they were armed, and they smelled of ozone and cheap cologne. Cassidy froze. She should have run. Dante had told her to run, but her feet felt nailed to the floor. By the time the last man entered, the diner was suffocating. 30 men. She counted them quickly, a habit from inventory checks. 30 men, all wearing the insignia of the Krell Syndicate. A red serpent coiled around a dagger. At the center of the pack stood Victor Krell. He was a wiry, rat-faced man with a silver tooth and a reputation for skinning his enemies alive. He stepped forward, his boots squelching on the mat. Dante didn't stand. He didn't even put down his coffee. He just swiveled on his stool, facing the sea of enemies with a boredom that was more insulting than a slap. "Victor," Dante said dryly, "you brought a crowd. I didn't know we were hosting a convention." Victor grinned, the silver tooth glinting under the fluorescent lights. "No convention, Moretti. Just a funeral. Yours." The men fanned out, blocking the windows, the door, and the path to the kitchen. Dante was completely encircled. The barrels of 30 guns were raised, all pointed at the man on the stool. 30 to 1, Victor sneered, stepping closer. "Even you can't do the math on this one, Dante. It's over. The Moretti territory is mine." Dante took another sip of coffee. "You're making a mess of the floor, Victor. Sal is going to be pissed. Sal is going to be dead if he comes out here," Victor spat. He pulled a heavy, chrome-plated Desert Eagle from his waistband and leveled it at Dante's chest. "Any last words? Maybe a prayer? Though I doubt God listens to men like us." Cassidy watched from behind the counter, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She saw Dante's hand twitch. He was fast, faster than anyone she knew, but he wasn't bulletproof. If he drew his weapon, he might take down 3 or 4 of them. But the other 26 would turn him into Swiss cheese. He was going to die. Right here, in front of her. The man who tipped well, who asked about her sick mother, who looked at her like she was the only calm thing in a chaotic world. Victor cocked the hammer of his gun. Click. The sound echoed in the silence. "Goodbye, Dante." Dante's muscles coiled. He was preparing to die fighting. No, Cassidy thought. Not tonight. Cassidy Miller didn't scream. She didn't faint. She didn't dive for cover. Instead, she did the one thing nobody in that room expected. The one thing that 30 hardened killers and 1 mafia boss didn't account for. She reached under the counter, but not for the silent alarm. Her hand wrapped around the cold, heavy handle of the industrial coffee pot, the one that had been sitting on the burner for 2 hours, boiling hot. And then she moved. "Hey!" Her voice cracked like a whip, surprisingly loud. Victor blinked, his eyes darting to the waitress for a split second. That was the mistake. Cassidy slammed the glass pot onto the counter with enough force to crack the carafe, sending a geyser of scalding, boiling brown liquid arcing through the air. It wasn't aimed at Victor. It was aimed at the breaker box on the wall behind him. The liquid hit the exposed fuses, which Sal had been meaning to fix for 6 months, with a sizzling hiss. Zzz-pop! Sparks showered down like fireworks. A loud boom shook the walls, and instantly the diner plunged into absolute, pitch-black darkness. "What the?" Victor screamed. "My eyes! I can't see!" Someone yelled. Chaos erupted. In the dark, the math changed. It was no longer 30 to 1. It was 30 blind men against 1 wolf who could see in the dark. And the waitress who knew every inch of that room. "Get down!" Cassidy's whisper was right beside Dante's ear before he even realized she had moved. She grabbed his wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. "Cass? Floor! Now!" She dragged the Mafia boss down behind the thick, bulletproof granite of the service counter, just as the first spray of machine gun fire tore through the air where his head had been a second ago. Glass shattered, ketchup bottles exploded. The diner turned into a war zone, but they were safe, for now. Dante looked at her in the dim light of the street lamps filtering through the smoke. He looked shocked. "You cut the lights." "I leveled the playing field," she whispered, pulling a hidden shotgun, Sal's insurance policy, from beneath the register. She racked the slide. Ch-ch-ch. She looked at Dante, her eyes no longer tired, but blazing with a cold, terrifying focus. "Now," Cassidy said, handing him the shotgun, "are we going to kill these bastards, or are you just going to drink coffee all night?" The darkness inside the iron skillet wasn't empty. It was heavy, filled with the panicked breathing of 30 men who realized too late that they were locked in a cage with a predator. "Hold your fire! You'll hit our own guys!" Victor Krell screamed from somewhere near the door. Too late. Dante Moretti didn't hesitate. He knew the layout of the diner from years of patronage, but he knew the rhythm of violence from a lifetime of sin. He rolled out from behind the counter, staying low, the shotgun Cassidy had handed him tucked tight against his shoulder. Boom! The muzzle flash lit up the room like a strobe light for a split second, revealing a chaotic tableau of confused hitmen. The buckshot tore through the front line, sending 2 men crashing into a table of condiments. "Over there! Behind the counter!" someone yelled. A dozen submachine guns opened up, shredding the Formica counter into confetti. But Dante was already moving. He wasn't where they thought he was. And neither was Cassidy. While Dante drew their fire, Cassidy had slipped into the kitchen. To the Krell soldiers, she was just a civilian casualty, a frightened waitress hiding under a table. They ignored the kitchen swing door. That was their second mistake. Cassidy moved through the kitchen with a fluidity that shouldn't have belonged to a woman who spent her days pouring coffee. She didn't fumble in the dark. She grabbed a boning knife from the magnetic strip on the wall and a heavy cast-iron skillet from the drying rack. She kicked the swing door open. A Krell soldier, a brute named Kincaid, was flanking the counter, his weapon raised, hunting for Dante. He never heard her coming. Cassidy didn't scream. She stepped in close, inside the arc of his weapon, and slammed the edge of the cast-iron skillet into his temple. The sound was sickening, a wet crack that dropped him instantly. Before his body hit the floor, she caught his falling MP5 submachine gun with her left hand, discarding the skillet. "Dante! 3 at your 9 o'clock!" she shouted, her voice cutting through the gunfire. Dante spun, trusting the voice instinctively. He fired the shotgun blindly to his left. A scream confirmed she was right. "How do you know that?" Dante growled, discarding the empty shotgun and drawing his own custom 1911 from his shoulder holster. "I can hear their boots on the glass," she replied, sliding across the floor to take cover behind a red vinyl booth. She checked the mag on the stolen MP5. "Standard issue, no suppressor. These guys are amateurs, Victor." Victor Krell, crouching behind the overturned jukebox, heard her. "The waitress? You're letting a waitress pin you down? Kill her! Kill them both!" The firefight that followed was brutal and short. The flashing lights of the gunfire created a disorienting staccato effect. Dante was a hammer, brutal, efficient, taking shots that dropped men instantly. But Cassidy was a scalpel. She didn't spray bullets. She fired in controlled double-tap bursts. Pop, 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 pop. She used the environment. She shot the chains holding the heavy specials chalkboard, dropping it onto a gunman's head. She slid a napkin dispenser across the floor to draw fire, then flanked the shooter when he turned. Within 3 minutes, the odds had shifted. It wasn't 30-1 anymore. It was 5-2. The floor was slick with grease, blood, and spilled milkshakes. Victor realized the tide had turned. The rat-faced man wasn't brave. He was a survivor. "Pull back!" Victor screamed, scrambling toward the shattered front window. "Regroup outside!" "He's running," Cassidy said, raising her weapon. "Let him go," Dante ordered, his chest heaving as he reloaded. "If we chase him, the cops will be here before we finish. We need to leave. Now." Cassidy lowered the gun. Her hands were shaking now, the adrenaline beginning to curdle into shock. She looked around the diner. Her life, her quiet, boring, safe life, was destroyed. There were bodies on the tables she had just wiped down. Dante stepped over the debris, walking toward her. In the flickering light of a neon sign that had short-circuited outside, he looked like a demon rising from hell. His coat was ruined, stained with plaster dust and blood, but his eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that burned. He reached out, not to take the gun, but to grab her arm. His grip was iron. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. "Waitresses don't know how to clear a jam on an MP5. Waitresses don't flank enemies." Cassidy looked up at him. The smell of cordite was thick between them. "I'm the girl who just saved your life, Dante. Isn't that enough?" "No," he said. "It's not." Sirens wailed in the distance. The Chicago PD was coming. "My car is out back," Dante said, pulling her towards the kitchen exit. "You can't stay here. Krell knows your face now. You stay. You're dead." Cassidy hesitated for a second, looking at her apron, stained with the night's violence. She untied it, letting it drop to the floor. "Drive fast," she said. The drive was silent. Dante drove a matte black Audi RS7, weaving through the Chicago streets with a precision that bordered on reckless. He didn't head towards the Moretti estate in Lake Forest. That would be the first place Krell would look, and the first place the cops would raid. Instead, he drove towards the industrial district, pulling into the underground garage of a converted textile factory on the river. The safe house was a penthouse loft, all exposed brick, steel beams, and floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking the dark, churning water of the Chicago River. It was cold, sterile, and clearly designed for a man who didn't expect guests. Dante killed the engine. The silence that followed was louder than the gunfire. "Get out," he said. Cassidy climbed out. Her legs felt like jelly. The adrenaline crash was hitting her hard. She followed him into the private elevator. He keyed in a code, and the doors slid shut. Inside the loft, Dante threw his keys on a glass table and immediately went to a wet bar. He poured 2 fingers of amber whiskey and downed it in one swallow. Then he poured another and slid it across the counter toward her. "Drink," he commanded. "You're going to need it." Cassidy took the glass. Her hands were trembling so much the ice clinked against the sides. She took a sip. It burned, grounding her. Dante took off his ruined coat and tossed it onto a leather chair. Underneath, his white dress shirt was soaked in blood on the left sleeve. "You're hit," Cassidy said, her voice small. Dante glanced at his arm. "Graze. A ricochet. I've had worse shaving." He walked toward her, invading her personal space until she backed up against the cold glass of the window. The city lights twinkled behind her, indifferent to the violence. "Stop shaking," Dante said, his voice softer now, but still commanding. He placed a hand on the wall beside her head, boxing her in. "I need the truth, Cass, and I need it right now. I don't believe in coincidences. A waitress at my favorite spot just happens to have combat training. Who sent you? Was it the feds? Or are you working for another family?" Cassidy looked him in the eye. This was the moment. She could lie, but Dante Moretti made a living, smelling lies. "I'm not a Fed, and I'm not Mafia," she said. "My name isn't Cassidy Miller." Dante's eyes narrowed. "Go on." "My name is Sarah Jenkins. 10 years ago, my father was a logistics contractor for the military. He worked in private security." "Private security," Dante repeated. "Mercenaries." "He taught me how to shoot before I could ride a bike," she said, her voice hardening. "He taught me how to clear a room, how to spot a tail, and how to disappear. He wanted me safe. Where is he now?" "Dead," she said flatly. "He took a job he shouldn't have. He saw something he shouldn't have. They came for him in the night. I was 16. I hid in the crawl space while they finished him." Dante studied her face, searching for a crack in the story. He saw the pain there, raw and old. It was the same pain he saw in the mirror every morning. "So you ran," he concluded. "I've been running for 10 years, she whispered. "Changing names, changing cities. I thought Chicago was big enough to get lost in. I thought being a waitress was invisible enough." "It was," Dante said, leaning closer, his face inches from hers. "Until tonight." He reached out and touched a smudge of grease on her cheek. His thumb brushed her skin, rough and calloused. "You fought well, Sarah. You have good instincts." "Cass," she corrected him. "Call me Cass." "Sarah is dead." "Cass," he tested the name. "You realized something back there. When we were behind the counter. You looked at me. Cassidy nodded. She took another sip of whiskey. The ambush, it wasn't just a hit. They knew exactly where you were sitting. They knew you didn't have your usual security detail. They knew the back door was welded shut because Sal lost the key last week. Dante stiffened. What are you saying? I'm saying Victor Krell didn't just get lucky, Cassidy said, her mind working sharply now, Sal. He had inside information. Someone told him you'd be there, alone, at that specific time. Dante turned away, pacing the room. Only 3 people knew I was coming to the Iron Skillet tonight. My driver, my consigliere, and my brother. Your driver is dead, Cassidy said. I saw his car outside. They slit his throat before they came in. That leaves Silas and Leo, Dante muttered. My brother Leo is in London closing a deal. And Silas, Cassidy interrupted. Is he the one with the limp? The older man who sometimes comes in with you on Thursdays? Yes. Silas has been with my father since before I was born. He raised me. Last Thursday, Cassidy said, her memory flashing back. Silas came in to pick up a takeout order for you. He was on the phone. He thought I was in the back, but I was refilling the sugar packets near the door. He was speaking Russian. Dante stopped pacing. The air in the room dropped 10 degrees. Silas doesn't speak Russian. He does, Cassidy insisted. He said 2 words clearly. Zatra, polnoche. Dante's face went pale, then dark with a rage that was terrifying to behold. Tomorrow. Midnight. The Krell Syndicate has been using Russian mercenaries for heavy lifting, Cassidy said. If Silas was talking to them... Dante smashed his whiskey glass against the wall. The crystal shattered into 1,000 jagged diamonds. He sold me, Dante snarled. The man who taught me to tie my shoes sold me to Victor Krell. He turned to Cassidy. The Predator was back. You're in this now, Cass. You saved my life, and you gave me the name of the traitor. That makes you a target for Krell and a liability for Silas. I know, she said. So what happens now? Dante walked back to her. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a burner phone. He tossed it to her. Now, Dante said, we stop running. You want to stay alive, you stick with me. But you're not a waitress anymore. Tonight, Senor, you're the only person in this city I can trust. He grabbed a medical kit from under the sink and sat on the leather sofa, wincing as he moved his arm. He ripped the sleeve of his shirt open, revealing the bloody gash. Stitch me up, Cass, he said, handing her a needle and thread. Then we're going to pay Silas a visit. Oh. Cassidy looked at the needle, then at the man, the Mafia King of Chicago, who was entrusting his flesh to her hands. She set her jaw. She had spent 10 years hiding. Tonight, she was done hiding. She sat beside him, the mattress dipping under her weight, and threaded the needle. Don't scream, she said. Dante smirked. A dangerous, crooked thing. I never scream. The rain had turned into a deluge, hammering the roof of the Audi like thousands of tiny fists. Dante drove with one hand, his left arm stiff and throbbing beneath the fresh bandages Cassidy had applied. They were moving into the Gold Coast district, where the streetlights were golden orbs, and the silence cost millions of dollars. Silas lives in the brownstone on the corner, Dante said, killing the headlights a block away. He likes to think he's a cultured man. First editions, rare scotch, classical music. He thinks murder is just another form of negotiation. Cassidy checked the magazine of her stolen MP5. Does he have security? Usually 2 men at the gate, but if he thinks I'm dead, he might have sent them home to celebrate. They exited the car into the storm. Cassidy moved differently now. In the diner, she had been reactive, desperate. Here, in the shadows of the elite, she was a ghost. She moved with a rolling gait, heel to toe, making no sound on the wet pavement. Dante watched her, a strange mix of admiration and suspicion tightening his chest. Who was she, really? And why did he feel safer with this stranger than with men he'd known for decades? They breached the perimeter wall easily. The garden was manicured, dead silent. No guards. He's confident, Cassidy whispered, pressing her back against the wet brick of the house. Arrogant. He thinks he won, Dante replied grimly. Dante picked the lock on the service entrance, a skill he hadn't used since he was a teenager stealing his father's liquor. They slipped into the kitchen. It smelled of expensive coffee and old paper. They moved through the house, the floorboards groaning softly under the storm's noise. In the study, a fire was crackling. Silas was there. The old man sat in a winged leather armchair, a glass of brandy in one hand, a phone in the other. He looked like a grandfather, with thinning white hair and a cardigan. He was smiling at something being said on the other end of the line. "Yes, Victor, it's done. The city is yours. Just remember our agreement regarding the shipping lanes." Dante stepped out of the shadows. He didn't raise his gun. He just stood there, dripping wet, blood soaking through his white shirt. "Hello, Silas." Silas froze. The phone slipped from his fingers and tumbled onto the Persian rug. The voice of Victor Krell could still be heard tinny and small from the speaker. "Silas? Silas, what's happening?" Silas stared at Dante as if seeing a ghost. His face went grey. "Dante, my boy." "Don't," Dante said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Don't call me that." Cassidy stepped into the light, her submachine gun leveled at Silas's chest. Silas looked at her, confused. "Who is this? The waitress? You brought the help?" "She's the reason I'm breathing," Dante said, walking closer. He kicked the phone away, severing the connection with Krell. "Why, Silas, you sat at my father's table. You carried his casket. You taught me how to lead. Why sell me to a butcher like Krell?" Silas set his brandy down with a trembling hand. He didn't reach for a weapon. He knew Dante too well. "Because you are weak, Dante," Silas said, his voice gaining a sudden, venomous strength. "Your father was a king. He ruled through fear. You? You want to go legitimate. You want to invest in tech, in real estate. You want to wash the blood off our name. But you can't wash it off, Dante. It's in the bone. So you killed me to save the business? I did it to save the legacy," Silas shouted, standing up. "Krell is an animal, yes. But he understands power. He will keep the organization alive. You were letting it die a slow, boring death." Dante looked at the old man. For a moment, Cassidy saw the boy inside the boss, the heartbreak of a son realizing his father figure was a monster. "You're right about one thing, Silas," Dante said softly. "I tried to be different. I tried to show mercy." Dante raised his 1911. "But tonight," Dante whispered, "I'm making an exception." "Dante, wait!" Silas started, raising a hand. Bang! The shot was deafening in the small room. Silas crumpled back into the chair, a single hole in the center of his forehead. The brandy glass didn't even fall. Silence returned to the room, heavier than before. The fire crackled. Dante stood over the body, his gun hand hanging loose at his side. He didn't look triumphant. He looked hollowed out. Cassidy lowered her weapon. She didn't say, "Good shot," or "He deserved it." She walked over to Dante and gently took the gun from his hand. He let go without resistance. "We have to go," she said softly. "Krell heard us. He knows you're alive. He knows you're here." Dante nodded slowly, tearing his eyes away from the man who had raised him. "He knows," Dante murmured, "and now he's going to panic." "Panic makes people make mistakes," Cassidy said. "Let's make him make a big one." They didn't go to another safe house. The network was compromised. If Silas had turned, anyone could have turned. "Where are we going?" Dante asked. He was in the passenger seat now, his energy fading as the adrenaline wore off and the pain in his arm flared up. "A place that doesn't exist on your maps," Cassidy said. She drove them to a dilapidated motel on the outskirts of the city, near the old rail yards. The neon sign buzzed and flickered. The sleepy O_L. The W was burnt out. "This is a dump," Dante noted, eyeing the peeling paint. "It's cash only, no cameras, and the owner owes my father a favor from 1998, Cassidy said. It's the safest place in Chicago right now. Inside room 104, the smell of stale smoke and lemon cleaner greeted them. It wasn't the Ritz, but it had a lock and heavy curtains. Cassidy pushed Dante onto the bed. "Sit. I need to check those stitches. You were moving around too much." She turned on the bathroom light, the harsh yellow glow spilling into the room. She washed her hands and came back with the first aid supplies she'd grabbed from the loft. Dante unbuttoned his shirt. His chest was a road map of violence. Faded white lines from knives, round puckered scars from bullets. Cassidy traced one on his ribs with her eyes. "Beirut," Dante said, catching her stare. "A deal gone wrong." He pointed to another on his shoulder. "Naples, a rival family." "And this one?" she asked, gesturing to the fresh, angry red wound on his arm. "Chicago," he said, looking into her eyes. "Betrayal." She cleaned the wound with efficient, gentle hands. The intimacy of the moment was thick, suffocating. They were two soldiers in a foxhole, the world outside trying to kill them. "Why did you really save me, Cass?" Dante asked quietly. "You could have run out the back door when the shooting started. You could have disappeared. Why stay?" Cassidy finished taping the bandage. She sat back on her heels, looking up at him. "Because I was tired," she admitted. "Tired of running. Tired of being nobody. When I saw you sitting there, facing 30 men without flinching, I realized I missed it." "Missed what?" "The fight," she whispered. "I missed mattering." Dante reached out with his good hand and cupped her face. His thumb stroked her cheekbone. The air between them crackled. He leaned in, his intent clear. But before their lips could touch, Dante's phone, the burner he had taken, buzzed on the nightstand. The moment shattered. Dante pulled away, cursing under his breath. He grabbed the phone. It was a text message, not from a number, but from an encrypted server. "He has Leo, the docks, Warehouse 4, 3 a.m. Dante went cold. "Leo? Your brother?" Cassidy stood up, instantly shifting back into combat mode. "He wasn't in London," Dante said, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "It was a setup. Krell had him grabbed before the hit on me. He was the leverage in case I survived." Dante stood up, ignoring the pain. "If I don't surrender by 3 a.m., he kills Leo." "It's a trap, Dante," Cassidy said. "You walk in there, you both die. Warehouse 4 is a kill box. One way in, one way out. He'll have snipers in the rafters." "I know," Dante said, checking his gun. "But he's my brother. I'm not Silas. I don't trade family for safety." He walked to the door, then stopped and looked back at her. "You've done enough, Cass. Stay here. If I'm not back by sunrise, leave the city. Go to Vancouver. I have a contact there." "Shut up," she interrupted. Dante blinked. Cassidy was pulling her hair back into a tight ponytail. She looked fierce, beautiful, and terrifying. "You're walking into a trap," she said, "which means you need a distraction. And you need a sniper." "I don't have a sniper," Dante said. Cassidy walked over to the closet where she had stashed a long canvas bag she'd retrieved from the trunk of the Audi, something she hadn't mentioned earlier. She unzipped it. Inside lay a disassembled Remington 700 sniper rifle, matte black and well-oiled. "You don't," she said, assembling the barrel with a practiced click. "But I do." Dante watched her, a slow, dark smile spreading across his face. "Remind me never to piss you off, Cass." "Too late for that," she said, racking the bolt. "Let's go get your brother." The Chicago docks were a graveyard of rusted metal and fog. The mist rolled off Lake Michigan, thick and freezing, obscuring the towering cranes that looked like skeletal dinosaurs in the gloom. Warehouse 4 was a massive corrugated iron structure at the end of a pier. Floodlights cut through the fog, illuminating the wet concrete. Dante parked the Audi 300 yards away, behind a stack of shipping containers. "Give me the earpiece," Cassidy said. He handed her a small tactical comms bud. She placed it in her ear. "I'm going high," she said, pointing to a gantry crane overlooking the warehouse roof. "It's a rusted ladder, wet metal, 60 feet up. It'll take me 10 minutes to get into position." "I'll give you 10 minutes," Dante said. "Then I walk in the front door." "Dante," she grabbed his arm, "don't die before I can shoot them." "I'll try my best." She vanished into the fog. Dante watched her go, feeling a strange tightening in his chest. He checked his watch. 2:48 a.m. He waited. The rain drummed on the roof of the car. He thought about Silas. He thought about Leo. He thought about the waitress who tasted like cheap coffee and danger. 2:58 a.m. Dante stepped out of the car. He walked into the light, his hands raised, showing he was unarmed. The heavy steel doors of the warehouse rolled open with a screech of grinding metal. Inside, the space was cavernous. In the center, under a single hanging light bulb, sat a chair. Tied to it was Leo Moretti. His face was beaten, one eye swollen shut. But he was alive. Surrounding him were 40 men. Krell wasn't taking chances this time. Victor Krell stood behind Leo, a gun pressed to the back of the younger man's head. Victor looked manic, sweating, his eyes darting around the shadows. "Alone!" Victor screamed. "I told you to come alone!" "I'm alone, Victor," Dante's voice echoed in the vast space. He kept walking, his footsteps steady. "Just me and you, let the boy go." "Stop!" Victor yelled. "Right there, check him!" Two goons patted Dante down, taking his 1911 and a knife. They shoved him forward. "You're hard to kill, Moretti," Victor sneered. "Like a cockroach." "And you're loud, Victor." "Like a chihuahua," Dante replied. Victor pistol-whipped Leo. Leo groaned, spitting blood. "Don't touch him." Dante's voice dropped an octave. "I'll do whatever I want," Victor shrieked. "I won. I took your territory. I took your consigliere. And now I'm taking your life. You have nothing left, Dante. No backup. No friends. No hope." Dante looked at his watch. 3 a.m. exactly. He tapped his ear. "Now, crack!" The sound of the high-velocity rifle shot arrived a split second after the bullet. The man standing next to Victor, the one holding the detonator to the C4, strapped to Leo's chair, head snapped back as red mist sprayed into the air. He dropped instantly. "Sniper!" someone screamed. Chaos broke loose. Crack! Crack! 2 more men dropped. The shots were coming from the roof, punching through the skylights with impossible accuracy. "Get cover!" Victor screamed, dragging Leo backward, using him as a human shield. Dante didn't dive for cover. He dove for the dead man. He grabbed the fallen guard's assault rifle, rolled over his shoulder, and came up firing. "Cass, keep them off the east flank," Dante yelled into his comms. "Copy that. 2 tangos moving to your right. Dropping them now." Crack. Crack. It was a symphony of violence. Cassidy was raining death from above, pinning the Krell soldiers down, forcing them into Dante's line of fire. Dante moved like a wraith, cutting through the confusion. He wasn't outnumbered anymore. He was the hammer, and Cassidy was the anvil. He reached the center of the room. Victor was dragging Leo toward a back office. "Victor!" Dante roared. Victor turned, firing wildly. A bullet grazed Dante's hip, but he didn't slow down. He couldn't. Dante raised the rifle, but he couldn't take the shot. Victor was too close to Leo. "Drop it, Dante, or I blow his brains out!" Victor screamed, hiding entirely behind Leo's battered body. The gun was jammed into Leo's neck. Dante froze. The shooting in the warehouse slowed as the last of Krell's men were picked off by the angel of death on the roof. It was a standoff. "You lose!" Victor panted, his eyes wide with madness. "I'm walking out of here with him, and if you follow, he dies." Dante's finger hovered over the trigger. He couldn't do it. The angle was impossible. "Cass," Dante whispered into the mic, "do you have the shot?" There was a pause. A long, agonizing silence filled with the sound of rain on the metal roof. "I can't see him, Dante." Her voice came through, strained. "He's too low. The angle is blocked by a steel beam. I can't take the shot." Dante's heart stopped. Victor grinned, sensing the hesitation. "Say goodbye to your brother, Dante." Victor began to back away, dragging Leo into the dark corridor. Dante looked at Leo. Leo looked back, his one good eye filled with resignation. "Let me go," the look said. But Dante Moretti didn't let things go. He looked around desperately. He needed a distraction. He needed a miracle. And then he saw it. The hydraulic line for the heavy loading bay door, running along the wall right next to Victor's head. "Cass," Dante said, his voice deadly calm. "Shoot the red pipe, 3 feet to the left of the door. Steam line, it'll scald them both. Do it!" Crack! The bullet struck the high-pressure pipe. It exploded outward with the force of a bomb. A massive jet of superheated white steam blasted directly into the corridor. "Ah!" Victor screamed as the boiling cloud enveloped him. He instinctively threw his hands up to shield his face, the gun moving away from Leo's neck for a fraction of a second. That was all Dante needed. He didn't shoot Victor. He sprinted. He covered the 20 feet in 2 seconds, diving into the steam cloud. He tackled Victor, the momentum carrying them both crashing through the drywall into the office. They hit the floor hard. The gun skittered away. Victor scrambled for a letter opener on the desk, slashing wildly. Dante caught his wrist. Dante's eyes were burning from the steam, his body screaming in pain, but his grip was unbreakable. "For Silas," Dante grunted, smashing Victor's wrist against the floor until the bone snapped. Victor howled, "For my brother!" Dante punched him, the sound like a wet sandbag hitting concrete. "And for the waitress." Dante wrapped his hands around Victor's throat. The hiss of the ruptured steam pipe slowly died down, replaced by the rhythmic drumming of rain on the corrugated metal roof. The warehouse, which had been a cacophony of gunfire and screaming only moments ago, now settled into a heavy, suffocating silence. The cloud of white vapor began to lift, revealing the devastation of the back office. The drywall was shattered, the desk overturned, and the floor slick with condensation and blood. Victor Krell lay still amidst the wreckage. The man who had terrorized the city, who had skinned his enemies and broken the codes of the underworld, looked small in death. His reign of terror hadn't ended with a grand cinematic speech, but with the brutal, efficient violence of a brother's rage and a waitress's bullet. Dante Moretti pulled himself up from the floor, his breath coming in ragged, painful gasps. His tuxedo shirt was shredded, stained with grime and blood, and his knuckles were raw and split. A graze on his hip burned like a brand, but the physical pain felt distant, muffled by the sheer weight of exhaustion. He stared at the body of his enemy for a long moment, not with triumph, but with the cold finality of a debt paid in full. He turned away, limping back out onto the main warehouse floor. Leo was still bound to the chair in the center of the room, his head slumped forward. Dante moved as fast as his battered body would allow, pulling a serrated tactical knife from his boot. He knelt beside his brother, sawing through the thick zip ties that dug into Leo's wrists. "Leo," Dante rasped, his voice cracking. Leo flinched, then lifted his head. His face was a mask of bruises, one eye swollen shut, his lips split. But the other eye, the Moretti eye, was clear. He looked at Dante, then passed him to the silent office. "You look terrible, brother," Leo croaked, managing a weak, bloody grin that exposed red-stained teeth. "You should see the other guy. Oh, wait. You just killed him." Dante gripped Leo's shoulder, his fingers digging into the muscle, reassuring himself that this was real, that he hadn't failed. "I thought I lost you. When Silas turned, I thought that was it." "You almost did," Leo whispered, the bravado slipping away to reveal the trauma beneath. He looked up toward the high, dark rafters of the warehouse, where the mist still swirled. "Who was the shooter, Dante? That wasn't one of ours. We don't have anyone who can make shots like that in zero visibility. That was military-grade work." Dante didn't answer immediately. He stood up, turning toward the massive, rolling steel doors of the loading bay. "She's coming down," was all he said. A minute passed. Then footsteps echoed on the concrete. A figure emerged from the shadows of the loading bay, backlit by the harsh floodlights of the pier. Cassidy walked towards them, the heavy Remington sniper rifle slung over her shoulder like a backpack. She was soaked to the bone, her hair plastered to her face in dark, wet strands. Grease from the crane ladder stained her hands, and rust smeared her cheek. She didn't look like a waitress. She didn't even look like a soldier. She looked like a Valkyrie who had dragged herself through the mud of hell and come out the other side. She stopped 10 feet away. She didn't smile. She didn't cheer. She just looked at Dante, her eyes scanning him clinically for life-threatening injuries, assessing the threat level, calculating the next move. "Is he dead?" she asked, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "It's done," Dante said, the words heavy with finality. "The Krell Syndicate is finished." Good. The tension that had held her upright seemed to snap. She unslung the rifle and set it down carefully on a wooden crate. Her hands, previously steady as stone, began to shake violently, the adrenaline crash hitting her like a physical blow. She walked over to a forklift and slid down against the cold metal tire until she was sitting on the dirty concrete floor, her head doused, resting back against the yellow steel. "I think I need a cigarette," she murmured, closing her eyes. "And I don't even smoke." Dante limped over to her. He didn't offer a hand to help her up. He knew she wouldn't take it. Instead, the King of Chicago lowered himself down next to her. He sat shoulder to shoulder with the woman who had saved his life, ignoring the grime on the floor. "You saved my family tonight, Cass," Dante said quietly, his voice rough with an emotion he rarely let the world see. "There is no amount of money, no favor, no debt I can pay that covers what you did in this building." Cassidy opened her eyes and looked at the ceiling. "You can start by buying me a new apron. I think I left mine at the diner when the shooting started." Dante chuckled, a low rumbling sound that turned into a groan as his ribs protested. "I can do that. I think I can afford an apron." 6 months later. The winter in Chicago had been harsh, burying the city in grey slush, but spring was threatening to break through. The iron skillet had reopened 3 weeks after the shooting. The bullet holes in the walls were patched and painted over, the shattered glass replaced, and the blood scrubbed from the linoleum until it shone. To the casual observer, it was the same greasy spoon it had always been, smelling of bacon grease and lemon polish. But the regulars knew. They whispered over their eggs and toast about the night the devil came to dinner and the angel who sent him back to hell. It was 11:45 p.m. on a Tuesday. The bell above the door chimed, a sharp, cheerful sound. Dante Moretti walked in. He wasn't wearing the heavy charcoal wool coat he used to favor. Tonight, he wore a bespoke tuxedo, the bow tie undone and hanging loose around his neck, the top button of his shirt undone. He looked tired, but it was a different kind of tired. It wasn't the paranoia of a hunted man. It was the fatigue of a builder. For 6 months, he had been rebuilding the empire, purging the rot Silas had left behind, and solidifying his hold on the city. He walked to the corner booth. Table 4. Sal, the owner, hurried over with a pot of fresh coffee, his hands trembling slightly less than they used to. "Mr. Moretti, good to see you. The usual?" "Just coffee, Sal. I'm waiting for someone." Dante sat with his back to the wall, facing the door. Old habits died hard. He checked his watch. 11:50 p.m. The bell chimed again. Every head in the diner turned. The conversation died instantly. The woman who walked in wasn't wearing a polyester waitress uniform with a name tag that said Cass. She was wearing a sleek, midnight blue evening gown that hugged every curve, shimmering under the cheap fluorescent lights. Over it, she wore a camel-colored trench coat that looked like it cost more than the entire diner's yearly revenue. Her hair, once kept in a messy bun, cascaded in polished waves over her shoulders. Cassidy Miller, or Sarah, or whatever name she had decided to keep, didn't look like she belonged in a diner anymore. She moved with a predatory grace, her heels clicking rhythmically on the checkerboard floor. It was the sound of authority. She walked straight to the booth and slid into the seat opposite Dante. She placed a small, encrypted tablet on the table between them. "You're late," Dante said, pouring a second mug of coffee and sliding it toward her. "Traffic was murder," she quipped, her lips curving into a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Literally. There was a hit on the north side, remnants of the Krell loyalists trying to make a move. I had the security team reroute us 3 times. Dante smiled. It wasn't the guarded smile of a boss. It was the open admiration of a partner. "How is the security division running?" he asked, taking a sip of the dark brew. "Better than your logistics," she shot back without hesitation. "I fired 3 of your lieutenants this morning. They were skimming off the top of the dock shipments. I replaced them with 2 ex-military contractors I trust and 1 former intelligence officer." "Ruthless," Dante murmured, watching her over the rim of his mug. "Efficient," she corrected, picking up her coffee. She took a sip and grimaced immediately. "God, this stuff is terrible. It tastes like battery acid." "Why do we keep coming here, Dante? We own half the restaurants in the city." "Because it reminds us," Dante said, his voice dropping an octave. He reached across the chipped formica table, covering her hand with his. His thumb brushed over the faint, white scar on her knuckle. A souvenir from the night at the warehouse, a permanent reminder of the violence that bound them. Cassidy looked down at their joined hands. The waitress who cleaned tables was gone, buried under layers of silk and steel. In her place was the woman who controlled the Moretti family's entire enforcement network. She went quiet, her expression shifting. The playfulness vanished, replaced by a serious, almost somber intensity. "You know," Cassidy said softly, leaning in closer so only he could hear. "There's one thing I never told you about that night. One detail I left out." Dante went still. "What?" "I didn't just pick up that coffee pot because I wanted to save you," she confessed, her eyes locking onto his. "I didn't step in just because I was tired of running. I did it because Victor Krell was the man who killed my father 10 years ago. I saw his face on the news, but I could never get close enough to strike." She squeezed his hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "When he walked into the diner that night, I knew it was the only chance I would ever get. I knew that if I saved you, you would lead me to him." Dante sat back slightly, processing the words. He studied her face, looking for deception, for malice. He realized the truth instantly. She had played the long game. In the chaos of that night, she had calculated the odds and used the Mafia boss as a weapon to aim at her own enemy. "So," Dante said slowly, his voice unreadable, "you used me. You used the Moretti family, my brother, and my war, all to get your revenge." Cassidy didn't flinch. She didn't apologize. She held his gaze with a defiant fire. "I was outnumbered 30-1, Dante. I made the only move I had. Does that make you angry? That I used you?" Dante Moretti, the man who made grown men tremble, looked at the woman sitting across from him. He saw the intelligence, the ruthlessness, and the loyalty that had been forged in fire. He realized he wasn't looking at a subordinate. He was looking at an equal. He lifted a hand to his lips and kissed the scarred knuckles, a gesture of absolute devotion. "Angry?" Dante whispered, a dark, dangerous smile spreading across his face. "Cara mia, I've never been more in love." Outside, the rain began to lash against the window, washing the grime off the Chicago streets. But inside the booth, the king and queen of the city just drank their terrible coffee, ready for whatever war came next. And that is the story of how a single waitress turned a massacre into a revolution. It's a reminder that in the world of shadows, you never underestimate the person pouring your coffee, because she might just be the most dangerous person in the room. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more gritty crime dramas like this one. What would you have done in Cassidy's shoes? Would you have run, or would you have fought? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. I've got a psychological thriller coming up next week that'll blow your mind. Thanks for watching, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.